Before we jump into the latest episode of Freelance Pod, have you heard about our first live podcast recording? That's right. Freelance Pod is going live in front of an audience. We'll be at the London Podcast Festival in September. You can join us at King's Place to watch me make an episode of Freelance Pod with a very special guest. He's a Syrian refugee, a journalist and a stand-up comedian. Abdul Tahan will join me on stage for the event. Here's a clip from episode 30, Being a Refugee is a Dream Come True, where Abdul explains the absurdities of the Life in the UK test, which all prospective British citizens have to take.
One of the sections in this test is about British values, and there was one of the things about British values, the ability to laugh at yourself. And, and I didn't know, this is like, okay, the ability to laugh at myself, does that make me British? And there was another one, there was a question, actually a mock test, asking you which one of these are British values, and it's going to the pub, eating fish and chips, laughing at yourself, or having a university degree. I said, well, obviously not having a university degree, but the rest of them, the three of them could be, any of them could be British values, like have eaten fish and chips while you're at the pub and laughing at yourself. That's it, I've cracked it. Please give me the British citizenship now.
If you'd like to hear more from Abdul Tahan, come along and see him interviewed on stage by me at the London Podcast Festival live recording of Freelance Pod. It's happening on Saturday the 7th of September at 2 p.m. The venue is King's Place, King's Cross, and you can buy tickets for under a tenner at www.kingsplace.co.uk/whats-on/words/freelance-pod. You can also find out more about the London Podcast Festival on Twitter at London Podfest, all one word. Let me know if you're coming along to my live recording. I'd love to see you there. On to this week's episode.
So yeah, and I've not presented anything before. Like I said, I'd done some comedy and I was still doing stand-up comedy quite frequently at that time. So I was used to being on a mic, and I find being on a radio mic so much less scary than being on a stand-up comedy mic, even if that stand-up comedy gig is like 4 people. I do enjoy it, but I don't know, there's something, I just find radio a bit safer to do.
Hello and welcome to Freelance Pod. My name's Suchandrika Chakrabarti and I'll be your host. Freelance Pod tells stories about creativity and the digital revolution. I've been a journalist for 13 years now and a podcaster for nearly 2, so I've seen a lot of the changes that digital has brought to the media. I've also trained a lot of people on how to deal with all those changes. I'm now freelance and juggle a number of jobs myself, writing for different audiences, making audio, teaching, speaking, presenting. It's a classic portfolio digital career. On each episode of this podcast, I ask a person who works in a creative field to tell me about how the internet's transformed or invented their job. From Twitter's director of curation to Ed Miliband's podcast producer, along with a few appearances from some guy called Charlie Brooker, we've been hearing brilliant stories about how the internet has revolutionised work and, well, our lives. If you enjoy the podcast, please do rate, review and subscribe over on Apple Podcasts, and why not tell a friend too? This helps our community grow, and that enables me to keep making Freelance Pod. You can also sign up for the Freelance Pod newsletter, which comes out every time there's a new episode, which is about every week. You can find the newsletter at suchandrika.substack.com. Suchandrika is spelt Suchandrika, so that's suchandrika.substack.com. The podcast is also on social, of course, and I do love hearing from you, so feel free to get in touch. You can find it on Twitter at freelance_pod_. It's on Instagram at freelancepod, all one word. There's also a Facebook group. Just search for Freelance Pod. The podcast isn't officially on LinkedIn, but you can find me on there too. I'm Suchandrika Chakrabarti, and I do share all that juicy Freelance Pod content on there. So on to this week's guest. Hello, it's me. I'm speaking to you from my balcony on Bank Holiday Sunday when it's gorgeous and hot and sunny, and it's a bit quieter out here than my flat because I put the washing machine on. Oops, not the best time to record links for a podcast. But anyway, just wanted to add that I interviewed Amanda a few weeks ago, and she very kindly invited me to BBC Broadcasting House in Oxford Circus in central London. and we went right to the top of the building and sat out on the terrace. So there is some traffic noise and it was a bit windy up there, but I think you can hear us well enough. And it was great to speak to Amanda and ask her all about podcasts and comedy and her dog. So I hope you enjoy.
My name is Amanda Litherland and I am the producer and presenter of Podcast Radio Hour from BBC Radio 4 Extra. So my background, how I got into everything, I was very lucky in that I got on a BBC production trade team in 2013, and when I did that I originally thought I wanted to go into TV, so I applied for it out of uni. I went to St Andrews and I did medieval history, useful for all jobs, kind of like the opposite of radio. So I had like no real skills at all in terms of like production of like TV or radio. I had done a student radio show, but like kind of didn't take it very seriously, and I was just joked around. I did a lot of comedy at university. I was in a sketch comedy group, and that's kind of what I like doing the most, and I thought I wanted to go into comedy TV. And I still do some like stand-up and character comedy, but I've kind of not had real time to do that in the last sort of year or so since I've been doing Podcast Radio Hour. But it's still a thing I enjoy. But anyway, so I was thinking I wanted to really go down the comedy route, and so I applied for the trainee scheme, and I got on it, which was amazing. When I did it, you did placements in TV and radio. So I did a placement in arts TV firstly, and then they made me do one in radio. I was like, oh, I'm gonna hate this. Oh no. But I went on the Chris Evans Breakfast Show and I helped them with 500 Words, which is their children's like storytelling competition. Really hated in telly, kind of, even when you're just being a runner, just standing around and retaking things over and over again. Like, I just can't be bothered. I just want to like get it done. So obviously radio is perfect for that. And I can still be a bit slapdash sometimes. I have to try not to be. I'm like, come on, get some wild track, like retake things, like, because I just want to like get it done.
So this is like 2013-ish.
Yeah, 2013.
I think TV, audio was not in people's minds, was it? Like, TV was the thing.
Exactly, and I honestly never would have thought I wanted to go into radio, but I just loved doing it. And then my third placement was meant to be in TV, but I got it changed and I worked on Front Row for a few months, and that was great experience, just kind of, because it's a magazine show and you get to do lots of small features and they really do just kind of let you get on with stuff. That was great. Front Row?
Front Row, yes.
Yeah, I'm really cool. So that was great, and then after that, like, this all sounds very simple. I was talking to somebody about this the other day. Like, I know I've been really lucky in being able to get things quite smoothly. So then after I did that trainee year, I then did a year placement at Radio 4 and 4 Extra. And that's what I do now. Basically, I've been doing the same sort of thing for the last like 5 years. So at 4 Extra, this is before Podcast Radio existed, I made trails, which is actually a real skill that people don't kind of realise, just being able to kind of package something into like 40 seconds and get across what the programme is and encourage people to listen, but without being boring. It's actually really difficult. I'm not one of the best trail makers. There are some people in our team who are incredible, and I don't know how to do it. It's really good, but it's really good kind of training of audio editing and also compliance, knowing what you can and can't say. So that's good, and definitely a thing that I think some people don't really look into I didn't know it was a like area of the BBC that exists, but it's a really good one for learning skills, I would say. So we also make 4 Extra, which is a pre-recorded station, so we record all the continuity announcements beforehand and then kind of stitch it together like an audio jigsaw, which is quite fun actually. And then I also sometimes, this job is like all over the place. I also do some duty producing of Radio 4, which is kind of supporting the continuity announcers and newsreaders, and kind of being the person in charge if anything goes wrong, which touch wood doesn't. And I was figuring out how it could work, and I was like, well, maybe a couple of podcasts, I'd recommend them, like, who should we get to host it? And I was like, I could host it. And I was like, maybe I could host it and have some guests in. And they were like, yeah, sure, that'd be fun. I was like, oh, you just ask. You just ask and you can get things, so that's great. So yeah, and I'd not presented anything before. Like I said, I'd done some comedy, and I was still doing stand-up comedy quite frequently at that time. So I was used to being on a mic, and I find being on a radio mic so much less scary than being on a stand-up comedy mic, even if that stand-up comedy gig is 4 people. I do enjoy it, but I don't know, there's something, I just find radio a bit safer, because I feel like people are at home, know what I'm doing. But to be fair, at first I was really nervous. I hate the sound of my own voice at first, and when we were sort of doing some pilots and stuff, I'd literally sit there physically cringing, being like, oh no, please don't. Whereas now I've done some trails for some of the programmes and stuff, and I sometimes do announcements and things just because I am under 45 and a woman who is vaguely regional, I guess. They get me to do a lot of stuff for BBC Sounds, which is cool. And yeah, I love doing it, and I love doing voice stuff, and so that's what I'm doing now. And yeah, so the programme just kind of developed from that. It started off as being, I would have a guest in. So for example, I got Deborah Francis White on the first one, and I've had her back a few times, but Deborah came in, she picked a podcast, her podcast was Griefcast. We then interviewed Carrie Lloyd, Griefcast, and then I picked a podcast, which was this one called Rumble Strip, which is a really little niche one in America about this woman who lives in Vermont and just goes and interviews people in her town. So that was the first ever one, and it kind of had that format for a while of guests would come in, they pick a podcast, I pick a podcast, and then that's it. And now I'm really trying to do a bit more kind of industry stuff, look analytically at things that are happening. I've covered events like the Podcast Awards and festivals. I'm trying to get out and about and do stuff regionally and go out to different cities and see what's happening. I've started doing a monthly one where we recommend loads of podcasts in one go, kind of by here's some new comedy stuff out this month, here's some new conversation stuff out this month. It's a really, really hard question, and I don't think it matters, the distinction necessarily, but I think that podcasts feel a lot more free and a bit looser. And with some podcasts, I think it's anyone can do it, so there's no barrier to it, whereas if you want a programme on Radio 4, you have to go through the commissioning process of all that, and then wait, and then see when it's going on the schedule, and then goes out. If any person wants to make a podcast, they just can. But in terms of I don't think that means that you should, even though you can do things you couldn't do on radio, I don't think that means you should just absolutely do anything. You should still have the same kind of concerns in mind of content and people's well-being and things like that, and things that you think about what you're saying, and is it responsible for you to be putting out this message or whatever. But I don't know, it's kind of a bit more free.
Yeah, I think it feels like something you can pick off a shelf in a way that you don't think of with radio. It's presented to you.
Yeah,
it's given to
that's you. Key exactly as well. It's you have to pick. You choose what you listen to. With the radio, you just chuck it on and whatever's on is on. Yeah, I'm just trying to showcase good stuff, and I'm really passionate about making sure that we also showcase stuff by smaller independent producers as well, because it's so difficult. And I think a thing that some people don't realise, that's come up a lot in conversations I've had with creators, is 50% of the job is making the podcast and the creative, having the idea, what am I going to do, what direction am I going to go in. But then the other half is the marketing and the hustle and thinking about, am I going to try and make money from this? Am I fine not doing that? How am I going to get people to listen to it? And it must be really hard. And I don't personally have to deal with that as much because I have the platform with the BBC. But I still find it difficult getting the word out there about my podcast. I think the name Podcast Radio Hour is difficult because it's 3 words that kind of come up a lot in things. And on certain apps, if you search for them on the programme, it doesn't come up. Or it doesn't come up until number 7 or something. Radio 4 Extra is kind of, we call it a sister station to Radio 4, so it's pre-recorded and there is no news or current affairs. And so it's a bit sort of lighter in tone, it's comedy, drama and entertainment, and it's kind of, you sometimes hear the same voices of continuity on 4 and 4 Extra, but when they're on 4 Extra they'll kind of be a bit lighter and a bit more sort of, what's the word? Because it's not casual, it's just a bit it's just there's no news. So if you think of it like that, it's the non-serious side of Radio 4 stuff. Although they do have like docs and stuff, but it's generally kind of more featurey docs rather than, you know, something super serious. So I always used to listen to it at night when I couldn't get to sleep, because my Radio 4 would like turn to world service and you just hear about some sort of activity happening somewhere in the world. Actually, switch over to 4 Extra and it's probably just some lovely drama going on. And it's an archive network as well. It's the key thing about 4 Extra. So play stuff from a while ago. So sometimes you get some kind of classic comedies that are like, you know, sometimes from like the 40s and 50s, but sometimes it's kind of like 90s stuff like Radioactive and things like that. And yeah, then old dramas, old features. But then we have new stuff. So obviously my programme is all new. We acquire other podcasts like Radio Lab and Moth and things like that. And Comedy Club is comedy every night from 10 till midnight, and that's got kind of new, not always new comedians, but kind of it's the continuity announcements are done kind of a week or so before, but the programmes are sometimes kind of older comedy, but not super old, as in like just from a couple of years ago. I don't think Radio 4 Extra takes a lot of commissioning. There's a 3-hour slot on Saturdays where they kind of have showcases that are, it's to showcase the archive, but it's you can package it up. So somebody did one about like the work of Steve Coogan, and it was like 3 hours of stuff he's done, featuring interviews with him, and then like kind of old programmes. They kind of have music that plays in between the programmes, like in the idents. There's no like pips, there's no news, there's no weather. It's all just the comedy and the drama kind of stuff. Whereas obviously Radio 4, you don't hear music that often, and news is at the top of every hour and everything like that. So it's kind of more of a structure. 4 Extra is a little bit kind of loose. Like I said, I do kind of think of my programme as a podcast that happens to go on the radio, but obviously I do have to bear things in mind, because it's going on the radio and it's got an audience on Radio 4 Extra who are people who might not normally listen to podcasts. So at first it was difficult of balancing, well, is this programme for people who listen to Radio 4 Extra, don't even know what a podcast is and want to find out more, or is this a programme for people who do know about podcasts and want some recommendations and want to hear about industry news and stuff like that? I have started to go down the latter route, really, because that's what I'm more interested in. And I think one of the key things, which sounds absolutely mad that this didn't occur to me earlier, was I was like, I need to make a programme that I want to listen to, because for a little period of time I wasn't first, and then I got a bit bored of it, and then I was like, I wouldn't want to listen to this. What am I doing? And I think that's, don't do something just because you think you should. I mean, I suppose it's different because I was sort of given a brief. But then, in order to be really passionate about something, I think you've got to make something that you want to hear. So just bearing that in mind has kind of changed my direction a little bit in the last few months.
You mentioned podcast discovery is really hard, and I completely agree with you. That's an issue with podcasts in general. What do you use, and in which ways do you find out about new things? I think it's an issue for anyone who writes or makes audio about podcasts, as well as for the podcast listener.
Yeah, well, choosing my guests that I have on is probably the key thing. So some people like Caroline Crampton, she is an absolute powerhouse. She listens to so many podcasts. She has a daily podcast newsletter. So I don't know. I mean, I speak to her about it all the time about, you know, how does she find her stuff. And she's really old school. She has like RSS feeds and whatever. And like, I haven't got my brain around that. I don't do that. And then this job is kind of, I never switch off in a way of like, I do have to make sure I force myself to switch off. But
someone in the pub might say,
exactly,
I've listened to...
I've got so many notes on my phone of just like, oh, such a thing, blah, 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 listen to this. Like, people are always recommending me stuff, I guess because they know that that's my job, so that's useful, actually. I do love hearing from people, and I do like it when people recommend their own stuff. I particularly love it when people recommend me something that isn't theirs or connected. You know, if people... It happens quite rarely, to be honest, but sometimes listeners do write in and say, hey, have you heard such a thing? We've not had these guys on yet, we'd love to hear about them. And I'm like, I want more of that, please. But I mean, I know a lot of it is like the self-hustle, so I'm not like judging people when they email in saying like, and I actively ask people to do that because I know it's hard. And so I'm doing these monthly ones at the minute where we're kind of recommending loads of new stuff. And and I'm trying to make sure that in that, because obviously I get a lot of big companies like Acast and Spotify tell me about their new things, so I'll include them because they're going to be the big things that people are going to be talking about, and I want to pick out, is this actually worth listening to? Like, is it going to, boost up people who are just, making things on their own in their bedroom? So, if we're talking about all the great comedy stuff, I am going to whack in a mention of, a niche podcast that maybe isn't for everyone. I think as well, a thing that I think you shouldn't worry about too much is listeners in terms of numbers, because actually what you want is passionate listeners and people who really love your stuff. And if that's not many people, but they love it, then that's great. Like, I don't really look at the numbers for my programme because it wasn't very big for a while, and it just made me upset. Not upset, that's like dramatic. It just made me feel a bit down.
You just don't know what to do with the numbers.
Yeah, I'm like, is that a lot? Is that not a lot? I'm not, and to be honest, I don't really know. And I honestly haven't looked at it for months, so I can't tell you. But I think that if you've got listeners who are really enjoying your thing and are coming back and they're passionate about it, then that's great. And if you are making a niche podcast, to be honest, you aren't going to get tons of listeners because it's too specific, but that's fine. Well, I work in Radio 4, so I work in the newsroom, and I work, well, not in the newsroom, but I work near the newsroom, and like we have the news on every day, so like, I am constantly seeing like serious stuff coming through, and actually what I want from podcasts is a bit of a break from that. I want to have a laugh. Sometimes I want to learn things, sometimes I want things more in depth. Like, I love Brexit Cast, but I think again that is a perfect example of, oh god, we all hate Brexit, but Brexit Cast is great, and it really like breaks stuff down, but it's not patronising, and it's entertaining, and you get to see that different side of people who you will see on the 10 o'clock news being deadly serious, giving their analysis, but then straight after that they're in the studio maybe having a glass of wine saying like, oh god, well, did you see this, and oh well, a secret source told me. And I think that that's what people want, is the more kind of informal fun side. In terms of are comedians good at podcasting, I don't know, I suppose being comfortable just chatting about stuff is just lend itself to it, I think.
Did that help you with your show?
Definitely, yeah. I think it took me a while to relax into it as well, and for ages, the only person I was getting really good feedback from was my mum. She'd be like, you're speaking too fast, calm down. So then I made myself talk as slow as, and actually it wasn't. And I think it's because I was nervous when I first did it, kind of interviewing people. I was very nervous about interviewing people when I started out, actually, because I had no experience doing that, and I was looking around BBC, because we have like training courses and stuff, and I was like, oh, can I go on like an interview training course? And I couldn't find one, but to be honest, like, you've just got to do it, I think, and the main thing for that is just like, do your research, be prepared, and then just have a conversation. I've had Luke Jones on the show a few times as a guest, and he picked up a lot of stuff from Eddie Mair when Eddie Mair was doing PM, and he said Eddie never has notes. He does all his research and he writes his questions out and what he wants to ask somebody, but he doesn't have them with him. It's just all in his head. And obviously, like, he's such an experienced newsman that, it must have taken years to do that. But there is something to be said for it, in that, like, you can't just rely on your notes. You don't have any notes right now, so
it's because wherever I look, you'll look too, which is natural. Again, like, you're more used to interviewing than journalists are, and you're describing to me how you've learned about interviewing. But when I look there, for instance, which I do to see the number, everyone will, and it's really natural. And so the more I look at my notes, the more it feels like a job interview.
No, definitely, I know what you mean. And so yeah, I do try and write stuff down, but I try not to like look at it. It's just kind of like, you've got it there if you need it. When I used to do comedy, I would write notes on the inside of my wrist of like, just break down what I was going to say in my like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it was. To just try and have the basics written down.
How did you get into comedy? What was like the first? Did you go straight to doing stand up, or
I always wanted to do it, and like at uni I was in a sketch group, and then when I came out of uni, I didn't do anything for about a year, and then I got very sad, and I was like, oh, I'm sad because I'm not doing anything creative. So I actually did a course at Soho Theatre. They do like a young company thing, and it was like a stand-up course basically. But it's just quite nice because you try stuff out in front of people, and everyone's really supportive, and then you all do your first gig together, and it's just a really nice way to do it. And there's a few places that do them as well as Soho. I would definitely recommend it because it's just nice to be in a supportive community, because there are some kind of open mic nights which are really like hard to do, and you know there's not many people there, and it will be tough and scary, and actually it'd be nice to start off where you're going to be in a supportive environment, and also just kind of getting some basic tips of like thinking about who you're making your jokes about, you know, things like don't punch down, like it's not funny to make fun of people who can't defend themselves or whatever, you know, like it's funnier to make fun of like the government or something like that. Not to say you can't make jokes about anything, but you know what I mean. But yeah, just like little tips like that of stuff that, you know, you might help you rephrase things. And yeah, so I did that, and then I did a few like kind of workshops at Soho Theatre, and I made loads of great friends through that, and some of them who are doing amazingly well, like Olga Koch and like Hugh Davies, and they're doing really well as comedians now. But I didn't go down the route of trying to do stand-up comedy as a job. You have to be so committed, and you have to like do gigs every night and like go everywhere and like do the circuit, and like I have huge respect for people who do that, and I'm quite a home bird, like to come home, like look after my dog. Like,
your dog needs you.
Your dog needs me. Like
nothing's stopping you doing a comedy podcast when
exactly.
you've got more time.
Well, that's the thing. I think it's something I will come back to, maybe do a comedy podcast at some point, but I'm enjoying presenting, and that's kind of different, and I can still do some comedy writing. I'm trying to write a play, a show. We don't know what it is. It's like a theatre show with a friend of mine, which probably will be mainly comedy based, but you know, you can always do things on the side in the background. Just because you haven't done a thing, it doesn't mean that you can like never do it again.
And just because you put it to rest for a bit as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that was the thing. I was just like, for a bit I was doing podcast radio and I was still doing some stand up, and I was really just splitting my energy, and I just felt so exhausted, and actually I was like, I just need to focus on one, and I chose this because it's a great opportunity to do. And yeah, I enjoy kind of having the autonomy of being a producer and a presenter, and choosing the direction the show's going to go in, and choosing guests, and kind of like curating it. But you know what I mean, like choosing the podcast, and I really love it. It's really fun. And yeah, I'd love to get like a bigger team. So we do have other producers in my department who will jump in and make one every sort of 6 weeks, basically, so I can have leave, also that I can have a week to kind of just think about.
Because I know a weekly show is a lot, actually. I've missed my target for Sunday, but I'm probably going to edit it and put it out tomorrow. Yeah.
I used to find it really hard interviewing people, and especially I would get a bit nervous. And I also found it is difficult because I have a guest on. Sometimes we kind of both interview somebody, and that's a weird dynamic. And especially when I was doing it with some people who were more experienced than me, sometimes they would kind of run away with it and they would just do it, and I would feel a bit like, this is my programme, like let me get a word in. But also I wasn't very confident, and so I wasn't really stepping in when I should have been. And basically I just started to book people that made me feel better about myself, and kind of like when I come out of a recording session, I'd be like, oh, I feel really great, like they've been really supportive to me, and like we just get on really well. Sometimes you just don't have a great dynamic. There's no one who's like awful, but you know what I mean. Yeah, and I think just sometimes people don't click, and it's nothing like to do with that person, but just, you know, just find out who you work well with and like play to that, you know. And sometimes you will have to interview people who you don't have to, you know, sometimes you'll interview people who you don't totally get on with those. There's some screaming happening in the background.
Is it the one show?
I think it's the one show, or maybe someone's on Radio 1, just so you know, we're not like next to a theme park or some sort of terrible thing happening. Yeah, but I think that if you've kind of practiced and you've warmed yourself up by talking to people that you really get on with, you'll be fine.
Do you think it has something in common with the unpredictability of comedy? Although you're close to the person, you have to collaborate with them, you don't know what you're getting until you've sat down and done the interview with them, or been a co-interviewer with them. And with comedy, again, you don't know how the audience is going to be until you've walked out there.
Yeah, a huge thing about reading the room and like knowing what people like and what people are going to respond to, and then kind of being able to improvise a bit, and also just to not panic. Also, a main thing from comedy is, if you're doing like a stand-up gig, to be in control. And even if you are absolutely terrified, don't ever let the audience know that, because then you've lost it. If you look like you're totally confident, you're totally happy, and you know what you're doing, then that's fine. And that's what I like always try and do. I mean, and I am now, to be honest, like 99% of the time, I'm really happy doing my programme. I'm very confident doing doing it.
You sound like you're having fun.
I'm having a good time, and like it's very rare that I feel uncomfortable or like, oh, I don't really know what I'm doing in this interview or whatever. I did a bit at the start, but that's just because I didn't have the experience, and I've learned so much, and it's been such a great like thing to be able to do. But yeah, also just kind of personally, like doing a bit more sort of personal development, thinking about like being more confident in myself and not being so self-deprecating, and like I was really quite anxious a couple of years ago, and I still have issues with that, but a lot less. I've really learned how to deal with it, and just kind of believe in yourself a lot more. And I got on this mentoring scheme, it was really great, and I just had the first session last week. I don't know who my mentor is yet, but like as a group, we all kind of did a sort of leadership skills and development, whatever. It was really good, and they made us write down like what's been your career path so far, and like if things have gone well, why have they gone well, and if things haven't gone so well, why is that, and like what are the patterns. And like it sounds really silly and obvious, but I realise like the times I've done well is when I've believed in myself, and when I've really like asked for things, and when I've felt confident that like, yes, I do deserve this and I am good enough. And that sounds so obvious, but to actually do that is sometimes hard. And there's that statistic of like, so and it is a statistic, I'm not just like making it up, but that like women generally will only apply for jobs if they reach like 95% of the criteria. Men generally will apply for jobs if they reach like 40% of the criteria. And I think that, yeah, sometimes you just need to be like, oh, it'll be fine. Yes, of course I can do this. Like, let's go. And yeah, just like believing in yourself. And yeah, so I've done a lot of like, yeah, self-realization, self-goals and whatever. But it does help. And I've just become a more confident person. But maybe that's just yeah. Things I'm looking for. Well, that's tough because I am looking for a variety, and really hard. I mean,
or like, at what point in production should they think about getting in touch with you, or is that helpful only once they've launched?
Well, no. I'm happy to hear from people who are about to launch. If they can send me like a clip or a preview. I also am happy to hear from people once they have launched, of course. And I don't know, I think also sometimes though with podcasts it can take you a few episodes to get into your swing of things, so actually think about whether you want people to listen to your very first one, or maybe you want to give it like a few weeks and then be like, okay, actually now I know what to do, change the format a little bit, and like I've got more relaxed or whatever, is this then? And to be honest, I would say that for people starting a podcast, before you even release any, make a few and like maybe consider just letting a couple of friends listen to them or something, get some really good feedback, and then start putting out episodes once you've kind of like tried it out a couple of times. I mean, it really depends what the podcast is and what the nature of it is. But no, I'm happy to hear from people anytime. And sometimes I recommend things that, you know, I've not listened to loads of the episodes, I have just like had a quick listen to a bit of it, and if I'm not playing a clip, then I'm happy to like mention things by name. Like the quality needs to be good. To be honest, that's never really been an issue. Most people these days are good. Like, why is your thing different from anything else? Okay, if you've got a podcast about current affairs, well, why is yours different and why is yours interesting? It's might be like, I would write a podcast about Mercury. You know, I haven't done much like true crime recently because I'm not that bothered about it. Like, I know obviously it's a huge genre, but like I got a bit bored with it a while ago, and there's some stuff which I still think is really good. I know there's a BBC Sounds thing coming up later in the year, which is not actually true crime, but it's kind of about true crime. I don't know how much I want to say, but like that sounds really interesting, and I am more interested in hearing. For instance, like I would love to hear a podcast like about why are we so obsessed with it?
Women make up the biggest proportion of the audience.
Yeah, that's true, and it is one that a lot of people do go for as like a default. I mean, I want to hear more comedy. Legendary Network, it's so silly, it's so weird, and I just love it. I howl every time because it's just a stupid world. Do you know what I mean? It's just like its own universe where like lamb is illegal, and it's funny because it's so deadpan. Like my favourite character is there's this one Eli Roberts who's like an abattoir owner, and then he goes rogue and he starts like a cult, and it's just done so seriously. One big tip for podcasters is listen to other podcasts, and it sounds so obvious, but you wouldn't write a book if you haven't read loads of books. Like, you wouldn't start, if you're going to start a podcast, listen to loads of podcasts, listen to things that are like what you want to do, and, you know, although of course, like, don't nick anyone's ideas and make sure your thing is unique. In order to do that, you need to listen to loads of stuff and see what else is out there, and take ideas from other people, and like, not take ideas from other people, but like, be inspired by other people's ideas and see where that takes you, and, you know, to some extent kind of compare and contrast. Like, if you're doing a comedy podcast, well, why not think about how a serious one has tackled this subject, and then like flip it around, things like that. But yeah, just listen to as much as you can and talk to other podcasters and talk to people. Tell people they're doing great things when they are. Collaborate with people. But yeah, I think the key thing is just like listen to as much stuff and consume as much stuff, and not just podcasts as well. I think also like watching TV, going to an art gallery, like doing something, reading a book, like is a creative thing and can inspire ideas just as much as anything can.
If you enjoy the podcast, please do rate, review and subscribe over on Apple Podcasts, and why not tell a friend too? This helps our community grow, and that enables me to keep making Freelance Pod.